One of the most important events involving the financial markets is currently about 13 hours away. Additionally, Bitcoin has increased by roughly 2.9% as the event draws nearer. Not too wild. We're going to discuss it. First of all, though, we are seeing some lovely green everywhere. In fact, many antique coins are beginning to somewhat increase in value in preparation of this occasion. However, I do view Bitcoin as the main issue here. Because if we are discussing Bitcoin, its current price is approximately $97,000. Earlier today, it did reach around 97.6K. And here is the point at which I start to worry a little bit because I am positive that many people will attempt to manipulate the markets by hopping into leveraged positions before this happens. And a cascade of liquidations could result from this. In fact, this is taking place as the majority of older coins are getting ready for a significant move on their corresponding USD charts. However, a lot of old coins are pumping into significant resistance levels, which worries me a little bit before this event because, in every case, if the judgment is bad, we usually do start to see a massive sell-off across the board. Naturally, you are already aware of the events I'm referring to by this point. Indeed, it is the Fed's decision to stop or reduce interest rates. We'll talk about that, but first let's talk a little bit about XRP, since it's only up around 2.5%, nothing really spectacular. The past 7 days have looked like this. The past month has looked like this. The XRP chart is shown here. We're barely making it on this chart, you know. I'm holding out for something to occur. Finally, while we wait for a significant movement or impulse to occur on this chart, we're getting close to the moment where we genuinely consider, okay, so what are the chances that XRP will reach a new high from here? How likely is it that XRP will reverse this trend, rise above some of these earlier highs, and surpass the highs from January? All right, so it is not likely to happen right now. And it's because of Bitcoin that I say that. Do I believe that it will remain low for the remainder of this year or something? No, I'm referring to the short-term perspective. The next week is the short-term perspective. Even on the daily, you can see that Bitcoin is in a fantastic uptrend, so I'm keeping a close eye on it as this event draws near. In terms of overall structure, it's not too bad. However, we are in that resistance zone, and I won't be content until we surpass 100,000 in the top spot. We still need to clean about 102,000 even after that. Our goal is to surpass these January-like highs. Here, we wish to finish this level. This will be a clear indication that Bitcoin is making a significant comeback. However, the market is becoming enthusiastic, and we still have a lot of work to do. While we are in the zone of resistance, the important thing to keep in mind while we are in that resistance zone is that, sure, XRP and many other altcoins are approaching a significant impulsive move. They are awaiting an impulsive action. That impulsive action might be a sell-off, and I know you people will be devastated to hear this. And this is because there is less liquidity in this area. I'm referring to the lengthy liquidations of all parties involved in this occurrence. Bitcoin might collapse sharply at a time when its dominance is 65.2% if we start to see a liquidity cascade due to the liquidations. As far as Bitcoin dominance goes, this is the highest point since the beginning. I simply lost it. I'm sorry. Just so I can zoom in quickly, let me go back to the 1 week. Consequently, this represents the pinnacle of Bitcoin's supremacy since January 2021. Let's take a closer look at this. As of right now, Bitcoin dominance is trading around 65%, and we are in a significant resistance zone overall. Therefore, if the Fed does make a move that is unfavorable to the market, and today is FOMC day, we are primarily discussing rate reduction, correct? As in, we'd want to see a rate reduction. I do believe that we sell off if we don't receive that. Additionally, I believe that it has a significant impact on the old coin market. Given the current state of Bitcoin supremacy, I believe that will eliminate many of these chart configurations. Naturally, it all depends on how low Bitcoin actually drops. Because if we're going to take a closer look at this using the 3-day chart, here is how the Bitcoin 3-day chart looks. As I mentioned earlier, there is a good gap that might potentially be addressed on Bitcoin. On Bitcoin, that would be between approximately 88.4 and 93,000. Now, breaking through this trend line is the major signal that we will fill this. That would represent a loss of roughly 94.5 thousand, 90.9. I would make the same argument as 94,000. A significant indication that this would be the next step would be the loss of 94,000. However, we must continue to observe the daily and truly perceive a loss. To be sure that this is the next stop for Bitcoin, we are actually waiting for a daily candle close below 93.7 thousand. Once more, we approach each day as it comes. We currently observe the Fed's decision. When considering the likelihood of a rate cut in May, the figure is roughly 1.7%. Thus, 1.7% is placing a bet on a rate reduction. This is hilarious. We now know that there is a 98% possibility that the Fed will maintain unchanged rates tomorrow, even on the poly market. Do you believe that minuscule 2% possibility might come to pass? Without a doubt, a rate reduction is possible. You know, I'm not wagering that we don't. I'm merely stating that right now the likelihood is low. However, it would be a huge news if we had a rate drop today. It would actually be a major catalyst. The bears would be dead and buried. And if we do that, we'll be back in a really optimistic situation on Bitcoin, as I do believe we'll break over $100,000. I am mostly focusing on the June session, and as we now know, CNBC is also telling us that there is a 1 in 3 chance of a cut. We now know that Jerome Powell has the ability to throw us a curveball here and cut us today or tomorrow. I continue to believe that the best time frame to observe is June. We currently have a June cut probability chance of roughly 31.9%. Many individuals are forecasting a cut of between 25 and 50 basis points. Although we are unsure of the precise cut, I would wager that it will be 50 basis points, but we will have to wait and see what transpires. But roughly 31%, followed by a 0.9% drop for a lot bigger one. But I'm really interested in what the Fed does outside of this, you know. I believe that today is likely to be one of the most significant days for the financial markets as a whole. Furthermore, I am interested in the conditions of the M2 supply for each of the major currencies. I've been discussing the overabundance of liquidity in the markets. We absolutely need additional liquidity, and the important thing about liquidity is that Bitcoin closely tracks it. I have discussed the 4-year cycle and the rationale for it. It adheres to the cycles of liquidity. Liquidity cycles typically last 4 years, and, you know, they coincide perfectly with elections. Even Bitcoin's timing is perfect, and everyone assumes that it's been coded into the cryptocurrency or something related. However, since the beginning of Bitcoin, it has simply been in perfect alignment. As a result, the 4-year cycle primarily follows the liquidity cycles, which are subject to significant change. However, since we already know that China has been in the lead, I'm concentrating on the M2. The European Union and Japan are beginning to make significant progress in this area. Furthermore, our attention remains on the United States and its future actions. Now, I've seen that a lot of people are discussing this latest Fed action.